Just fucking do it. Subscribe now.
During the seminars, the mentees, although I tell them, I only want to hear from you when you do deals. I'm not interested in your fucking problem. You solve them yourself or die trying. But there's a plethora of them that come in during the seminars because then they remember, and they tell me about their deals. And Maroney closed another deal, interestingly enough. And apparently the daughter of the person that he bought out went and vandalized the place, spray painted it, beat the shit out of it, This is the real life that happens. Like I told you, as Dan Locke told the Viking bitch, check your cash every day. Of course, with the greatest respect, Dan, you're dealing with, which ethnicity. They steal the doorknobs off the doors when they leave. And there's certain ethnicities that steal the furniture, the toilet paper, the soap that you have to clean the toilets. They leave nothing. We're going to tell you how you move in and the precautions you take tomorrow. But you can never underestimate, and it's the little old ladies that are the nicest to you that you buy that steal the most. So all that shit that, your parents taught you is horse shit. And when you get somebody that doesn't steal something from you, you think you missed something. And then you waste, days looking, what did I miss that they stole from me? Because you don't believe it. And there are occasionally somebody that's a righteous person, but they're few and far between. The kids are just fucking crushing it, and it shouldn't be this way. But when they see me on the YouTube live, more or less, like this is more or less live, it gives them, as they say in Kentucky, more incentive. And Andrew Carnegie said it, Warren Buffett has said it, amongst many others. If you need to be motivated, next. Andrew Carnegie said about 130 years ago, the 4 keys to success. Number 1, a financial motive must prevail. Number 2, financial motive must prevail. Number 3, financial motive must prevail. And number 4, financial motive must prevail. And even though Andrew Carnegie wasn't Dutch, he could have been. Money talks and bullshit walks. Irrespective. Now, most of you are maybe the Murph. There was a thing that came out in the early 60s. It was Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it was a very famous paper, book, whatever. And it came out, and it was prevalent just when I started university and flunked out again and flunked out again. Then I went to the military. When I came back, it was even hotter. And it basically was the first thing that people wanted to know that they're safe. And then maybe 8th or 9th. Now, the lighting and the music and the benefits and shit like that. Okay. And the financial motive was not even in the top 6 or 7, which is a load of shit. It's like they interviewed some of you morons that have never done cock in your life. Now whether you're, and there's a slide, I don't know if I'll use it, that says that whether your battery ran out of your iPhone is in the hierarchy of needs. But that's all bullshit. And there was a survey taken a couple weeks ago that vis-a-vis this argument, not real argument, but between the millennials and younger, whatever the younger ones were, whether they want to come back to work. And when the Corona first started, 31% of them said that they'd want to come back to work in the office. Or 61%. Then when they just did it again, a year later about, it was 31% would want to come back to work in the office. And that same survey data, they asked the kids, would you come back to the office if we paid you $5,000 more a year, $10,000 more a year? And it peaked out at $30,000 more a year to come back in the office. 65% said no. I'd come back in the office for $650 more, let alone $30,000 more. When we talk about some of the stats later on today and tomorrow, that the more 40% of kids less than 30 men live at home still. And there's a whole series of stats that show that, for example, 25% of the people don't want to get driver's licenses when they first come of age. In America, it used to be 16. I don't know what it is now. But here in this country and in Europe, it's 18, I think. You can start taking driver's lessons, I believe, at 17 with a driver's learner's permit or some shit. When I was a kid, you couldn't get out of the house fast enough. You would go live on a park bench as long as you didn't have the thumb of your parents on you. I mean, you just wanted to get out. I'm thinking of that pig class of yours. I had some buddies from Oklahoma that moved into a guy named, I believe his name was Eric Pitzer. I know his name was. And he, when we were in boot camp, the farm boys talked about their first sexual experience with chickens, sheep, and shit like that. And when you have sex with it, well, you needle dicks, probably not. You split the chicken in half, so it's dead as you're fucking it. And this Pitzer guy, we moved into the barn. My older brother and I. And because the opening of the barn was away from the house. So when they went in and out all hours of the night, it was harder for his dad, who would beat him with a rake, to catch him doing bad shit. And yes, every time we snuck out, we were doing bad shit. But now kids sneak out and they don't do bad shit. And there's just a number of statistics that show the demise, which I pound to death. But mostly, Microsoft is going to, as I said yesterday or the day before, is telling their employees they have to spend 51% of the time in the office. Now, I'd like to know how they're going to keep track of that. Of course, you can keep track with when you're going in and out of the office with your card. But the kids don't want to work. And this PPP thing for the last year and a half has accelerated. The COVID has accelerated a lot of scientific things, which would have taken 10 years, we did in 6 months or 10 months. Fair enough. But it's also accelerated the demise. It's accelerated the laziness. It accelerated the lack of commitment by probably more than 10 years. Because I told you, when the easing ends, you're going to see businesses that only stayed in business to collect the money, and as I said yesterday and the day before, wrongfully, the monetary easing, a lot of it you don't have to pay back. Some of you in this room have participated, and it's just accelerated, which has made us even better. In the email from Gerard, who is the gangster lawyer, to refresh your memory, he said, everything you're saying is true. And even though we're kind of getting back to normal here in Manhattan, it's still fucked, and people are still afraid, and still people are, selling their assets off at big discounts. But a few of the kids have made the mistake that they get so enthralled because a $10 million deal is now $4 million. But the cash flow doesn't even cover the debt service on the $4 million. And it gets by them. I don't know how the fuck it can get by you, but it gets by them. But a lot of the kids are finally, even though I've said this for years and years and years, their first offer is 100% seller finance. Their first embarrassing offer that pisses them off is 100% seller finance. And one of the deal that I believe Gerard just described to me, was he said it was a fair offer. Well, if Gerard thinks it's fair, it's by definition unfair to the other side. But and the person didn't take it, and so he waited around until they went out of business, and then he immediately went and took up the lease, and apparently changed the signs on the building, and was in business. And Dr. So-and-so went on sabbatical. I don't know what the fuck he said. You never know what a Manhattan lawyer, especially a Manhattan criminal lawyer, will tell you. Any questions about either the Viking bitch or Andreas, which we shoved through in a short period of time? Okay. Last night you saw. I love that. I've actually talked to the old man. I try to get him here. I try to get a lot of these guys here, none of them come. Can't remember his 8 wives. Just the most important takeaway from that film, the greatest tennis coach in the history of tennis can't play tennis. And for all the Googling you guys have done, and all the fucking motherfucking books you've read, and all the video cassette, all the shit to learn the subject matter, the why. You spend more time studying the why instead of the how. The greatest, at that time, I think it was 186 titles, and he can't play the fucking game. What does that tell you? Other than you should blow your fucking brains out, metaphorically speaking, of course. You do. And why do you study so much?
Sabotaging activities.
Correct. And these guys that say they read 2 books a day and all this bullshit, I have to take a deep breath whenever I hear that shit, because I know it's not true. Most of those guys don't read 2 books a year. Yet you want to believe. You want to believe that. Because you're stupid. Because you think there is a shortcut. You think there is some sort of secret sauce, and there isn't. You're 2,000 cold calls away. That's it. Some of you that are a little more polished, and I don't think that Belgian waffle guy was polished at all, 1,200 cold calls. You know, but let's just say it's a given 2,000. 2,000. We've had kids that have come to the seminar start the cold calls while they're here. We have kids that come to the seminar that get a chairman before they leave. They've got half of their board. And when the meat had asked me during the seminar, I said, just wait till it's just 3 or 4 days. Wait till because I didn't think he knew what he was doing. Well, it doesn't matter whether he knew whether he was doing or not. He just went and did it. And as you told me last night, it was just 100% balls. But you still look like your mother just died when I'm looking at you now. How many mothers have passed away in this room? 2 of us. Yet everybody else in the room looked like their mother just died. Because you're processing. So he keeps saying 2,000 calls. Maybe he means it. Like Andre said, 1,613. And he's pretty kind of like a superstar. Whipple, 1,800 calls. Lucinda Burke, 1,200 calls. The Belgian Waffle, 1,200 calls. And he's a Nimrod. That's what you're processing, if not on a conscious level, on a subconscious level. Because again, I beat it to death. You don't want to be a salesman. You didn't go to school. Your parents didn't send you to school to be a salesman, did they? Anybody in this room, their parents send you to school to be a salesman? No. Better, Okay, comments about love means 0.
Tough love gets the job done.
My dad invented tough love in the late 40s and early 50s on me. He invented tough love. And virtually nobody in this room was raised through tough love. A couple of you, your parents beat you. We don't do it anymore. We used to say, how many in this room have never been screamed at until you got here? And then you raise your hand. Then we'd ask you, how many of you in this room have ever been physically disciplined by their parents? No, I'm not asking. We used to ask, okay? And then very few would raise their hand. In the 90s, when I asked that question, everybody in the fucking room raised their hand. Then we'd ask the question, have you ever been in a physical altercation in school, a schoolyard fight? Very few would raise their hand. How many were in a bar room brawl? Rarely did anybody raise their hand, okay? And we go down the list. And how many knowingly understand that they avoid confrontation? After all those questions, how many knowingly, that in your soul, you know you don't want to be confrontational? Not physically confrontational, but just confrontational. And almost everybody in the room would raise their hand. I rest my case. In caveman days, which I should have lived in, I should have lived about 60,000 years ago, or 160,000. If you saw a good-looking bitch, nice fat ass, like Nelly says, and big tits, you just hit the other motherfucker with a club and took her. And if you hit the other guy when he wasn't looking, you got away with it. And if he was looking and he caught you, then it was a fight, and whoever's the strongest. And now, 99% of you would walk away if they spit in your wife's face. You don't need to be a MIT engineer like Brian QLA Rose to connect those dots. What else about the movie? Zero. Love means zero. Yes, sir.
He didn't care that he hurt his tennis players. He just kept moving on. He didn't look backwards.
Sounds like Steve Jobs to me, amongst others. And almost everybody in this room would do the opposite. I'm reading an email from a mentee who fucked up big time. And he said that if there was a word that transcended sorry, I think he didn't say it quite that good. There's never there's only a one time to make a first impression. The first impression is when they look at you, even on the Zoom. Okay? The second first impression is when you open your fucking mouth. And you look, in the old days, they'd say, you look a fool. Not just because your communication skills suck, but because you're not sure the right words to use. Because when I say you're illiterate, I don't mean illiterate that you can't write. On whole, Europeans are more literate than Americans. On whole. The education system is, across the board, rich to poor, is better. The education system in America, if you're rich, quality. But if you happen to be from a ghetto or something, it's pretty poor. That's why they have these special schools in America, in ghettos, in barrios, where they have, I can't remember the name of the kind of school they're called. Yes, chartered. And my high school, which were morons, is a chartered school now. My high school that I went to. The high school I tried to burn down. This has been on YouTube, when I was a senior in high school, Walt Wojak, who's passed away, who looked kind of like Butterbean. And I wrote on my social media that when we put his ashes to see, when we were in junior high school, we used to go up to the college and beat up kids. When he was in junior high school, he could bench press 300 pounds. He looked like Butterbean, that boxer that's on. He was a slightly lighter Butterbean. And we're sitting in the senior quad, and our school was locked down. In other words, when you came into school, you couldn't leave the campus till the school was over. And if you got out of school at 1, but school gates opened up at 3:30, you were fucked. Unless you were going to climb the fence to get out, you were there. So we're in the senior quad at lunchtime, and we're eating big boy hamburgers. And there was no delivery shit then. So the enforcer, vice principal, a guy named Hank Leeds, came up and said to Ruben Munoz, who recently died for serving life for murder in Florida, Walt Wojak, and myself, where did you get those fucking hamburgers, Peña? Assumed that I was the source of it. I said, we had them delivered, Hank. And you couldn't call teachers by their name, first name. When this period's over, get to my office. So when the lunch period was over, we went to his office, and he handed us our diplomas. This is 3 weeks before school let out. Get the fuck off campus. We don't want you here. We know you're only going to cause trouble. So I put we put our diplomas in our pocket. We went down to a pool hall, nearby pool hall, and we're shooting 9-ball in about our 10th or 11th pitcher of beer. Walt Wojak, the intellect of us, said, we got fucking rights. Excuse the expression, there's a nigger named Martin Luther King that's making a speech right now. I got a dream. Now, none of us knew what that meant, except, the blimp. So we went back to the campus, kicked the door in of the boys' vice principal, the enforcer, and wadded up our diplomas and threw them in his face. You can't keep us from being on this campus. We're going to come here every day, which was more than we ever came, and I'm going to burn this fucking school down. And by God, I tried. I was not successful, thankfully. 0. He didn't care if he hurt people. Antithesis of almost everybody in this room. Some people say the QLA system is just a facade for breaking people's hearts and souls. There are some people that believe that. Those are people that dropped out of the program or failed. What about when he manipulated his boys against each other? Last night you had something to read about how Steve Jobs manipulates people. Success leaves clues. Some would say Trump manipulates people. I would say Biden does. If Biden was honest, he'd come forward. You notice how he has not produced his medical exams. He never will. You'll read about him in a book when he steps down and Harris takes over. My dementia mother-in-law talks better than he does. Joe, I know you're not watching this, so don't take that as a fucking compliment. What else about love means zero? Yes, sir.
He was the first that take the kids out of the parents' home in a little prison style and train them in a young age.
About 3 years ago, we had a kid here that was in the school, his tennis school. He was from South America. He was Mr. Tennis or so fuck of the early 2000s, a gifted athlete. And he was there, and he cried during this talk about the movie. He sat back there. He said it was worse than this. You have no idea how it was to be there for 3 years. From the time he was 12 to 15, I think. He says, but he says, almost all of us were world-class athletes, but there's only one top of the heap. There's just one. And I wasn't it. But I was number 3 or 4, and he wouldn't piss on our face if we were on fire. He nurtured number 1, and he nurtured number 2 to take over number 1. That's it. And he says that you don't produce that many superstars. And I asked the kid who had been through the school, did anybody ever question the fact that he couldn't play tennis? He says, never came up. The only thing that we're questioned is if one year he only had 2 or 3, or 1 instead of 2 or 3 world top-ranking tennis players. And they started saying he was getting old when he was in his early 60s. So now I think he's in his late 80s. And that film was taken about 3 years ago, so he was middle 80s. And he says that's the only thing. People are only interested in results or the lack thereof. What else about... Yes, sir.
He said if you don't do wrong, you can shoot you can reach the tip of the mountain.
If you can't do wrong, you can't be king of the mountain. A lot of the things I say, when I say I rather, I may be wrong, but I'm never in doubt. Occasionally, as I'm saying the thing that is wrong, my brain is not so sick that I can't process black from white. But people like myself and Mr. Trump say a lot of things for effect. Everybody understand what that means? Say it for effect. Say it for shock value. And shock value isn't always 100% the truth. I'd like to think majority of what I say is truthful, but some of the things are just, some of the things that President Trump said were just off the wall. I mean, when he said he was putting turpentine and taking shots, whatever that wacko thing he said about it, he was taking shots that cured COVID. Yeah, I mean, but he said several things like that. But I mean, he a lot of that shit he really believes. But the biggest takeaway from Love Means Zero is, to me, is he didn't know the fundamentals of tennis. He didn't even know the fundamentals of getting in shape. He didn't know any of that. But he did know how to manipulate the young mind to greatness. He sure shit did that. And when he sold to the big conglomerate about 10 years ago, the results are still super, but they're not super anymore. One, I think he's running out of gas because he's getting older. And he's not there at 6 in the morning anymore till 10 at night. Beaten. He rolls in about 10 or 11 now, and he works till 3 or 4. But he sold for a big multiple. Okay, YouTube.